give you a little bit more of a background, and I'll be talking to you about how standing up experimentation program in your company. Who here runs experiments, A/B tests within their businesses? Who wants to start running or think that whatever they're running is actually not as optimal in terms of the output that is producing back to the business? I think more of you should raise your hands, because most of our A/B testing platforms or programs that we're actually running are not the most impactful or set up in the most impactful way. So I would love to tell you some of the things that I've learned over the last 10 years of how to set up good A/B testing platforms and how to scale them, how to be strategic with them, and how to get the most results out of it. And the most important question that I get most of the time is A/B testing really only for consumer businesses or self-serve businesses? And how do you actually apply A/B testing to B2B, where there's a lot fewer traffic and there's potentially a lot more sales touch involved when you're actually experimenting on the experiences. But let's get started. So the core of the experimentation platform or experimentation program is the difference between perception and reality. We do test to improve our metrics, for sure. But why do we test? Because we actually believe that the perception that we have of what will work is probably different than reality. Because if you think that your perception equals reality, you know exactly what to do, and whatever you will release out there in the product will be optimal result. But how many of you have actually released something out there and they didn't stick with the customers? How many of you have actually released something out there or put a campaign out there and there were no impact to the business? That means we actually have a widening gap between perception and reality. The classic example of how to illustrate it, to relate to all of you, is this. Probably all of you have seen this image, but I find it still fascinating. To me, it's mind-boggling that the square A and square B are the same colors. And that's the perception versus reality, because all of the other outside factors that are actually happening to your business might augment of what you think will work for the users versus what users actually want to do with your product. So how do you bridge for that? The classic example, we just ran this. I advise for a company, Miro, which is an online whiteboard solution, where we experimented on their homepage. And we took the homepage and we reorganized it in the more standard format. And we're actually hoping for improvement in conversion of the visitors that land on this homepage. Who thinks here that it actually drove increase in number of signups that the company got off the homepage? It did actually absolutely nothing. It did absolutely nothing. It ran for 2 weeks and there is no change whatsoever. Now this is a standard way of starting A/B testing program. You take a page and then you just put it into a better format and you're hoping that the users will convert better. But we have no idea why there is a suboptimal conversion rate on the current page, which is why our perception of what we thought was going to work did not change the reality of how customers actually interacted with the page. Our assumption here that it was too cluttered and by uncluttering it will get a better conversion rate, false. That's not what the issue was with the existing homepage to drive increase in conversion. Which really leads us to the positioning of experimentation program and how you land them effectively in the companies of separating business intuition from scientific method. We all are awarded on having an amazing business intuition. I had this idea. This CEO said something this person launched this campaign and they got amazing results. And that's all great. But business leaders are rewarded for having right intuition or being lucky. And while that may scale at the beginning, how do you continue reinforcing that you can continue getting lucky with your assumptions that you make about our users? More importantly, luck is the fundamental starting point of any given product. When you're trying to go after product market fit, there are so many failed examples out there, so many companies that never actually get the traction because they didn't get the idea right. And there's very few that have, and a lot of it is around being lucky with your idea and the traction that it will get with the company, with the customers. Now, then we reinforce this behavior and we ask our leaders to continuously get lucky in their decision making. But there's a couple of things that actually start happening, which I'll talk about in a second as the company starts scaling. What I propose that we adopt as a mindset is growth mindset. And growth mindset is a scientific way to achieve maximum distribution of your product. This really gets back to the question of what is growth for your company. Growth can mean very different things depending on which stage you're in. It can be just traction at the product market fit. It can be usage if you are in the beginning, right post your product market fit. It can be revenue after you've achieved your product market fit and you're in a scaling stage. But the most important thing to adopt from the beginning is that you have to have a growth mindset internally to achieve maximum distribution of your product via scientific method. Now, this is not a new concept. And let me play a situation for you. In medical field, there's lots of drugs that are being developed in order for us to cure sicknesses. Imagine a process in which one of the CEOs of the big pharma company says, I have an idea. I think this combination of these ingredients will cure the cancer. And they just ship it. And they watch how it actually performs on the patients. Would that be acceptable to you? That would create an outrage. Yet, we're in the companies. We have an amazing idea, and we ship it to our users. Now, I totally get it. The consequences is not as severe. Bad customer experience on a SaaS product is nowhere comparable to consuming a drug that actually you expect to do something and it does something not else. But can we accept that in tech and in SaaS, we have to follow the same rigor of experimentation and testing of what actually needs to be released to our users to achieve best results possible? Can we stop asking our leaders, our employees to get lucky with their decision making? And can we apply a growth mindset and testing methodology to actually figure out what works best for our users? Because it's not up to us to like the flow, the campaign, the experience. It's up to our users to like it. So let's listen to them and let's actually do A/B testing on everything you do within reason if you have traffic. So let's talk about where actually the perception versus reality starts to widen. From my perspective, at product market fit, if you got lucky and you have a product market fit, you know exactly who you developed that product for because you probably had a pain point. So you developed product for people like you, which is great. And you get the traction and you get pioneers into the product and they love it and they start spreading it around. And you have very high intent users that are actually first adopters and it works great. Your reality and perception are one of the same at that point. And then you start scaling. What does scaling mean? Scaling means you expand into different channels and you bring lower intent users that are not pioneers. You start doing new releases, so you actually start changing your product from the original product market fit. You start expanding into different use cases that potentially your product was not even designed for. And all of a sudden, your perception versus reality are completely two different data points. Now, that happens normally, and it's not something that you can avoid. You can have all of the customer interviews you want. You can have a lot of user research. Fundamentally, as you scale, as you have volumes coming through your product, you cannot truly understand what works for masses versus your original product market fit. So this is where A/B testing comes in. You have your quantitative data. Your quantitative data is the actual performance that's happening in the product. You have your qualitative data, which overlays users' emotion and their psychology of how they're thinking and perceiving your product. Now start creating third data set, which is your A/B testing data set, which actually bridges quantitative and qualitative. We see this, they say to us this, now if we do this, what happens? And that actually creates causative relationships that you understand what matters in your product, what doesn't, who it works for, who it doesn't, because you can actually test those levers. So that's all fine and great, and it's hypothetical. So let's talk about actual steps in terms of what does it mean to release a strategic experimentation program. First of all, you need to have clear definition of what is it that you're testing. Having a shotgun approach when you're doing experimentation may yield to absolutely nothing. There are so many companies that do a lot of A/B tests, and they call a win here, a win here, a win there. They push it to the production, and your metrics just don't move. And then everybody starts questioning the data. Well, what are you doing? Why is this actually not moving? Why are you calling all of these wins, but we're not seeing fundamental impact to the business? I've heard that story a lot. I don't know how about you, but it helps to actually break it down and create the focus and create the steps of how to design an experiment that will actually have an impactful delivery back to your business and will improve your customer experience. Number one, focus on the business lever. Know that what you actually need to move. Is it an acquisition lever? Is it a monetization lever? Put it as a value metric. So don't say, I need to increase clicks to this button. That's a test metric. Your value metric is acquisition, activation, monetization, or retention. Those four are your value metrics that actually drive benefit to your business. Everything else of the experience of progressions through the flows, through the funnels, clicks, those are test metrics that help you explain your value metric, but never set your experimentation or any test to increase a metric that is not a value metric to your business that will not have an impact to the bottom line. So, 4 categories: acquisition, activation, monetization, and retention. Those are your value metrics. Know what they are for the business. So acquisition, new registrations, for example. Monetization, new orders. So actually set that that's the lever that you're hoping to drive. Number 2, you actually need to understand who are you going to be targeting. It's very easy to say, okay, I'm going to drive new orders. Great. What does it mean? Are you going to drive people that are actually already in the pricing funnel and you get them to convert better? Are you going to get more people into pricing funnel? And that's how you're going to get more orders? Are you going to get more people to even register for your product before you even get them into pricing funnel? And that's how you're going to get more orders? But very clearly understand, where are you going to be focusing? Who are you going to be focusing on to drive those new orders? Then you need to identify suboptimal behavior. We skip the step 99% of the time. We say, okay, we need to drive orders, and then we go, okay, simplify pricing page. We actually need to step back and say, what is the suboptimal behavior for my target group that is happening in the product right now? Articulate it. Articulated that on the screenshot that I showed you 2 home pages, that I believe the page is too cluttered and people get lost in all of the words that we have there in order for them to convert. Articulate your suboptimal behavior. What that does, that's your H0. That's your control behavior. Your test, we're going to be trying to say, no, the clutter does not matter. So simplifying it will improve the conversion rate. That's going to be your H1, and you're trying to reject H0. But identify and verbalize the suboptimal behavior. Then you ideate on the optimal behavior. What is it actually that you want that experience to look like? Which leads you to the 5th point, which is an actual tactical point where you start designing your test, is create a solution hypothesis. So if it's too cluttered, or you think it's too confusing, or do you think users don't get your value prop, or you think you're not targeting the right people with whichever value prop that you actually have, then you say, okay, this is how I can actually fix it. And after I figure out how to actually fix it, because now I know what's suboptimal, now I know where I want to be, here's how I can fix it, and here's the sequencing on which I can start testing that fixes. Now, there is a big asterisk to all of this, because A/B testing is all about statistics, and I've majored in statistics, and I know how crazy it can be, and stats is only really greater than math if you have enough data. So you can come up with all of the structure, all of the suboptimal behaviors that you want, but if you don't set your sample size accordingly, forget it. If you don't have enough traffic to even test on a certain area of the site, and it takes you 6 months to get results, forget it. It's not impactful. So you need to understand the basic of statistics if you're going to go embark on this journey. So you don't call results too early, because guess what? With small sample sizes comes big volatility. And if you call results too early, you just compromise the entire methodology of your testing. But which lever should you start with? And we're one of the most companies starting their experimentation where they have a lot of traction. Acquisition. Because it's a funnel. It's a funnel where we have most of the traffic that starts in the acquisition. It's actually the easiest place to start in many ways because it mostly consists of your logged out website. It's fairly easy to drop a solution like Optimizely or Google Optimize and start testing right away. It's fast, it's easy, you can prove the concept that you can actually move the lever, and that's where you have most of the traffic anyways. So acquisition, great place to start. And A/B testing does originate very often in marketing teams at the beginning because marketing teams, especially performance marketing teams, are already very data-driven. So they start experimenting with optimization of the website to get the most out of the channels that they're driving traffic from. Activation. Activation is usually the most impactful one where most of the drop-off happens. Your activation is broken up into 3 steps. There's a setup moment. There is aha moment of, oh, I get it, what is it that you're doing? And there is a habit forming moment. Now there's an ongoing value exchange in which I actually understand the value of the product. So setup moment, aha moment, habit moment. Now, it's actually most of the drop-off happens there because the setup is complicated for a lot of products. There's a lot of, it's very difficult to sometimes to truly show that aha moment and get into the habit loop as fast as possible. So, but there's still usually a lot of traffic and huge drop-off, so it's still very much preferable place to start if you don't want to start with your acquisition. But it's a lot harder because it's an in-app experience, and usually to do tests within in-app, it's a lot more difficult to actually implement, and you need to involve your engineering team. But that's definitely the second lever that you should be going after. Next one is monetization. We all want to start on monetization. It's the most impactful lever that you can possibly affect in your business because that drives dollars. And who wouldn't want to stand up a new program or experimentation that actually drives dollars? Because then your CEO is happy, your leadership is happy, you get a lot more resources because you're delivering dollars. Now, it's very appealing to start with it. However, if you don't have enough traffic, please, please, please don't start with it. Your test should not run more than a week or 2 weeks. If it's going to take you more than 2 weeks to get the results that will be acceptable for the business above the standard error rates that are created by the sample size that will be in 2 weeks, don't do it. It'll be too much. It'll be too much, and then you'll wait for 6 months, and then you get a 5% lift, and it's nothing to the business. Go somewhere where you actually have a lot of traffic to start experimenting with. And then there's retention. Retention is the least traffic, but I would say it's one of the most impactful one, because if you don't have a leaky bucket situation, the less pressure there is on acquisition to actually drive traffic from the top. So retention is very lucrative, but I think it's one of the last ones that everybody should be going after, because there's a fewer, the measuring cycle is longer. How do you know if you retained a user? How do you retain a user? What is your retention metric? And don't tell me it's a logged-in user. That's too broad. So which methodology to choose? I also hear a lot of arguments. Should we do Frequentist Approach? Or should we do Bayesian Approach? I recommend if you run less than 10 tests at a time, Frequentist Approach is just fine. So what are the benefits of Frequentist Approach? Fundamentally, what it does is that you measure the probability of finding new population mean, but you have no idea what it is. You just say, as a test, I found a new population mean, and I'm certain that there is a new one, but I have no idea what it is. So that's easier to comprehend from the calculation perspective. It's p-values, it's statistical significance, it's sample size, normal distribution. All of us had elementary statistics somewhere in our educational careers, and we can understand what those results mean. However, what most people have a mistake in making is in Frequentist Approach, they get a result in their test variation. Let's say the test variation sees a 7% lift, and they say, oh, I can promise to business 7% lift. That's actually wrong. Because in Frequentist Approach, the only thing that you're doing is you're rejecting control variation. And you're saying that that's not the optimal one, there is a better one, and I found a new distribution. But you have no idea what that metric is until you roll out to actual, the entire population size and the production experience. So be very, very careful not to get attached to those lifts in Frequentist Approach, because they might be deceiving. And then you will be promising something back to the business that doesn't actually matter. Or that's not true. In Bayesian approach, it's a little bit more complicated to calculate. You need to know the prior distribution, which is a little bit more complicated to set up and to get going from an analytics perspective. However, if you're doing a lot of tests, Bayesian approach is very powerful because it actually calculates probability of you getting a certain lift. So you don't just have an indicator value like a frequentist approach, reject or accept, reject or accept, and I don't know what value I'm actually accepting for. More importantly, you're saying, I am testing to be 80% or 90% confident that my lift in the test variation will be 5%. Now that's powerful, and you can do a lot more smaller tests that get you capture a lot more goodness out of the smaller wins versus frequentist approach usually has much bigger deltas in which you actually want to test within. So if you have a velocity of the queue that is happening at least 20, 30, 50 tests at a time, Bayesian approach is actually better because of the biggest fallback in the frequentist approach is the type 1 and type 2 error. And we don't talk about it in business too much, but I think we also should have a very open view on this. In frequentist approach, with 95% significance, we all love 95% significance, right? 5% of the time, you will make the wrong call. Period. Out of 100 tests that you run, 5% of the time, you will make a decision on the test variation to proceed with it when it was the wrong one. That's the law of statistics. You're welcome. Now, the worst one actually, and this is where Bayesian is really coming in terms of the volume optimization versus value optimization, is that you will recognize a significant test result 5 out of 20 times. So your power of 80% or 20% of the time, your test variation will actually be better than control, and you will fail to recognize it. Now you think, oh my God, I'm missing 20% of the wins. And if you're testing a lot, that actually sums up to a very large amount. So you do want to move into Bayesian. But if you're testing your testing is just ramping up and your testing frequency is not that high, then 20% is actually very much acceptable because you go for bigger wins. So smaller wins don't really matter. So your type 2 error is not as big of a deal. But be aware of it, that 5% of the time you will flat out make the wrong call, and 20% of the time there is something better out there that you fail to recognize. Now you think, why is it even acceptable to be at 20%? Well, it's because it's not, you're still staying with control, so you're failing to accept, you're failing to reject control, which is, you're still at your control. There's nothing worse in it. So it's not like you have accepted the 5%, that you accepted something that is better, which actually can be worse, which is really bad, which is the 5% is the maximum measurement that is acceptable in that sense. But on the 20%, you just fail to recognize that something is better. So it's a lot lower risk to your bottom line at the end of the day, and that's why we set the power at 80% and we set statistical significance at 95%. In the last couple of minutes, I just want to show you some of the examples of the tests that I've done with my clients as I do growth advising for them. And I want to just do a show of hands of which you think is actually a better variation, winning variation. So this is MongoDB. MongoDB is a NoSQL database, and their the main audience are developers. And this is a self-serve sign-up flow on their homepage. This is their homepage. This is actually a very interactive homepage. If you hover over these squares, they flop and they interact with you. Versus this was the test. Who thinks here that this clean version here won over control? About 30% of the room. They've achieved statistical significance on this being better at over 5% within 4 days. For developer audience, they don't need the fluff. They need to be straight to the point. And it worked for them. It was very clear win. The next one that I want to show is Malwarebytes. Malwarebytes is a cybersecurity company. And their pricing page, where we also worked on creating, so this is a control experience. It's a little bit zoomed out, so you kind of have the understanding. This is probably where the fold ends. So you have an understanding of that there's a lot of features that were shown in each of the plans. Versus this is above the fold view of the new pricing page. Who thinks that this page won over this one? Another like 30% max. this had statistical significance within a week of improving conversion on the page. Simplification of not making people confused. Again, why? Suboptimal behavior here was who knows what cybersecurity is and what they actually need to buy. So by creating it, looking at making it look very complicated, you actually diverted people from purchasing it from the first place. So by creating it very simple, very down to the point of this is what you need, this is what we recommend, actually worked a lot better. Most importantly is the trust portion here. In cybersecurity, you want to trust the company that you're actually downloading and installing on your computer. So focusing on trust and transparency was a big win for this page. The last one, I need to explain a little bit. This is again a company called Miro, which is an online whiteboard. And they went from the plan of they have a freemium with limited boards and limited teams. They have a trial for their team plan, and then they have the company enterprise plan. And they went to continuously doing freemium, yet completely unlocking your number of people, because let's see, you can only 3 team members here, completely unlimited team members here, introducing another plan, and removing trial, just going straight to paid. From freemium to paid, but making free offering more robust. Now, I'll give you a little bit of a background behind here. If you think about collaborating on the whiteboard, you're doing it with multiple people, probably more than 3. So a lot of people hit those 3 team member limit very quickly, and therefore they went into the 30 days trial right away. And then within 30 days trial, they only had 30 days to try or buy the product. So they expanded it to say, okay, unlimited, everything doesn't matter. There is a board limit, still 3 board limit, but then you can just buy whenever you hit 3 board limit. Otherwise, everything is unlimited. So they're monetizing on usage, and then they overlay the team pricing per user, as opposed to monetizing on number of users in order to switch to a paid offering. Now, I'm not going to ask you to do a vote of hands. This was a very extensive test, because this is a fundamental go-to-market shift. The beauty in A/B testing that they actually were able to sequence it out and release it to churned users first, and see how churned users out of trial reacted to new premium, to new freemium version, and it worked very well. And then they truly ran A/B tests on their acquisition funnel, and they saw that their virality just took off. Because now not limiting free users to only 3 free plan to only 3 users has unlocked the ability for teams to grow their understanding of the value out of Miro, because now they could collaborate together without any constraints on the team size, and that drove a lot more purchases down the line. So yes, they shifted what they're actually monetizing on, but they were able to do A/B testing to actually understand whether this was a good decision for the business and net positive versus negative. On the contrary, they could have just released and said, we feel it. And that would have been maybe great, but they've also done a lot of iterations during this A/B test to land it appropriately, so the upgrade triggers are displaced in the right way in order to not to hit the bottom line, which is the beauty of A/B testing, which you can do some smaller optimizations on just pages down to fundamental model shifts and understand the impact that it's driving to your user base and what it does across all of your value metrics of acquisition, activation, monetization, and retention. So a lot of information here. We actually, as I mentioned, I work for Reforge as a mentor, and we're releasing new experimentation course in March. So check out reforge.com. There's going to be a lot more of this in terms of how to actually integrate it into your processes, how to stand it up on your team, and how to evolve your experimentation platform. Thank you very much. Any questions? Yes.
Hi, thank you. This was very insightful. My name is Ophir. I'm interested about that activation step where you said it's also habit forming step. And I'm trying to figure out the difference between retention and activation. I feel like habit forming maybe is also in retention. So how do you differentiate? Like, help me kind of clearly differentiate between those two, and what is the definition of each one?
So retention is an output. What goes into the retention? Activation and engagement. So activation steps are set up, aha moment, and the first habit forming moment where I'm in the habit to do something with your product. Then engagement goes into the habit loop. I'm repeating my habit over and over again. So it's not that just I got to that point and I never do it again. I do it over and over again. That results in the overall retention. So it's a spectrum of a user journey, as opposed to saying, okay, you activate and then you retain. It's really more you set up, you aha, you habit, and then you repeat habit in the loop, and that's what outputs into retention.
So just to reflect back, would you say that introducing you to the habit, but then retention is repeating the habit?
Retention is an output of the habit loop that you create within the product. So not just get to the habit moment, but actually create a habit loop where people need to come back to the product and use the product over and over again. That's engagement that falls into retention. So from my perspective, retention is an output. Retention is not something you optimize for. It's like revenue. Revenue is an output, and there's a lot of levers that goes into it. Retention is a final output. So it's a measurement of how well you've been able to activate and engage your users.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Anybody else?
Hi there, my name is Dave. When you were talking about type 1 and type 2 errors, full disclosure, I haven't tried this, but this kind of piqued my curiosity on this. Have you tried increasing the significance level and doing fewer tests to try to affect more change, larger outcomes?
So this is a million-dollar question. Do you run 3 tests a year and you reach to 100% significance? Or do you run 100 tests a year and get to 95% significance? I'm all about experimentation is about speed of learning. You get to test the signals and then you get to really quickly make decisions. If I make the mistake 5 out of 100 times, you know what? I will overcompensate on it because I've ran actually 100 tests. Versus if I only run 5 tests a year, and then I'm less likely to make mistake because I'll reach to 99.9% significance. I've lost an opportunity to explore more options. So to me, it's an opportunity loss that is not worth investing, and I'm always optimizing for time that I can actually get the learnings. So every single time that there is a new initiative, my question is, what can we learn in 2 weeks? And that's the experimentation. So not what we can release or what actually the perfect world would look like. What data points can we have in 2 weeks? And that's a really great way to put it, to say at least you have an input, and that's still so much better. Think about it. Our business decision making has probably 50-50 ratio. Here, you maybe get 5% off. So to me, I'll take that odds over just guessing or luck any day. But I think speed is a better metric to optimize towards, the speed of learning when you're launching experimentation, not accuracy.
Thanks.